All right, great. So I think even though this topic continues to be covered and debated and all that, I think it still would be helpful to hear, at least some of the things you've been hearing and thinking about in terms of remote work and employee engagement and
Mhm.
building relationships with colleagues and also clients. Like, what are some of the things that you've been hearing recently in terms of how companies and professionals can manage that?
So it's a really tricky subject because the ideal would be to get people back in the office. We know that that would be the ideal in terms of building those social connections, keeping people motivated, stopping people from disengaging. But the problem with that is it's not a realistic expectation anymore. Because everybody's being remote work, we've adapted our lives around being remote. People have got pets. People are now in different situations where it's not feasible for them to go into the office. People have moved further away from the office now. So you can't now implement a new policy and say everybody come back to work, because what's going to happen is you're going to lose good employees
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to now look for remote work because it's much more convenient for them.
Yeah.
So even if that's the ideal option as a business in terms of productivity, it's not anymore. It's not feasible. And you can't have that expectation. You can increase, say, okay, come into the office once a month, but even that can cause some problems if it's not necessary. So the only really way to go around that is, okay, so how do we create engagement between employees while having them at home?
Mm-hmm.
Simple policy, turn your camera on.
Mm.
There's research showing that we can still build social connections and get the same. Sorry, that was my cat.
Oh, what? I didn't even hear
Oh,
anything.
he just made like a huge crashing noise.
Oh,
Uh,
I
I'll
didn't
just,
even hear it.
oh, wow. I'll just go
No, it's
back
like
and say
noise
it's about,
cancellation. It's like really, it's really good these days.
yeah. He jumped off of the bookshelf and landed on a bunch of stuff and my other cat.
Oh, okay. Yep. No,
Yeah.
literally no commotion on.
Wow.
Yep.
I'll just go back to
Yeah, yeah, no problem. I'm not even gonna edit it.
yeah. We have that sometimes where my cat will pop in and I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, it's all good.
So we the only other way we can go around that really is to build those social relationships while being online, and having cameras on is effective. There's research showing that we feel more socially connected to people when we can see them.
Yeah.
And that sounds like a really obvious thing, and it is very obvious, but we don't really bring it to the forefront of our mind when we think about it. Like
Yeah.
simply implementing a policy of cameras on for this meeting. And you get some pushback of, well, I don't feel comfortable having my camera on, I can't for this reason. Well, the opposite then, or the alternative is then come into the office. So
Mm-hmm.
you're in the workplace, you are in your working hours. If you are not available to have your camera on, then what are you doing working?
Mm-hmm.
It is not an unreasonable request to say at this time, on this day, you
Mm-hmm.
put your camera on. You should be at your desk, wherever that desk may be, with a camera. And if they don't have the equipment, it's your obligation as a business to provide the equipment.
Yeah.
And if they're not podcasters and they're not doing any media, it doesn't have to be world-class equipment, but just
Yeah.
make sure that they can have a decent camera. So it really is that simple of making sure that there's time for social connection. And that also involves outside of just business meetings. So
Mm-hmm.
having, whether they're like required or promoted and not necessary, but we really encourage you to go to these to build
Yeah.
the relationships. Having time to get everybody together socially just to discuss what's going on is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because your comment, even just right off the bat, of like having people in person is ideal.
Yeah.
I It's interesting because there are some companies who have just required like you're back in the office 5 days a
Yeah.
week. And I've spoken with some of those professionals, and it's just interesting because they're like, like some of the bigger banks will do this. And they have the ability to do that because they can always replace, like their
Yeah.
workers are always replaceable. That's part of kind of
Yeah.
the culture at some of these companies, which is like you either bend to our will or we'll replace you. Like you're very replaceable. Um, And so there's a little bit of a culture of fear there. But, you know, these workers come into the office and they are not actually interacting necessarily with one another and building those ties. They're on video all day at the office anyways.
Yeah. And you know what it does when you're made to feel like you're replaceable? It just diminishes passion and it
Yeah.
diminishes motivation, because if I'm replaceable, I'm just going to do what I need to do. I'm just going to go in and simply do my job. I'm not going to give you any extra of me, because you don't deserve extra of me, because you don't treat me like I am uniquely valuable.
Right.
And when companies say,
Yeah.
we make no attempt to make any coordinated effort to accommodate you. If these are your preferences, we don't care. You come to our preferences. I get from a business model why a company would want to do that. But if you want your employees to be retained, and
Hmm.
retaining employees is a very important financial decision, and productivity decision, you need to give a little bit of flexibility. Now, if the job requires you to be in office because you physically have to do
Yeah.
something with your hands,
Yeah.
that's different. We're not
Yeah.
talking about those situations.
Right.
We're talking about situations where you don't physically need to be in the office. If you are on a laptop,
Hmm.
why do
Right.
you need to do it in that location? And some people will argue the security side, where we can manage security better. No, not really,
Yeah.
because the biggest security threat is social engineering. You
Mm.
can monitor emails exactly the same in the office as you can from a laptop at home.
Right.
So a lot of the arguments really don't make a huge amount of sense. And when you add up the benefits and the negatives, giving people a little bit more freedom over their own working environment is really effective and really important for employee retainment. But you have to make sure you are encouraging that social connection.
Yeah.
In the office, just being around people is really good. Even
Hmm.
if, like you said, they're not really engaging with each other, they're still at least around each other, there's some proximity. That diminishes completely online. So
Yeah.
if you do allow people online, which I encourage,
Hmm.
making sure that there are opportunities to connect.
Hmm.
Because I was having this conversation recently with a friend of mine, and she said she feels so disconnected from her workplace because it's all virtual.
Mm.
But often people won't go to the boss and say, "Hi, I feel disconnected from the
Yeah.
workplace."
Right.
They just get on with their job. It's not, they don't feel like it's their place to say.
Right.
So as a leader, sending a survey or asking around in a team meeting, anything to say, who would like some more social connection?
Hmm.
And if you want that, we'll arrange these social groups. And then also requiring sometimes so there's like a team get together a little bit more regularly as well.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting because I think like the function of your job has evolved so much. And I don't know the answer to this, but it just seems like less and less people are expecting their jobs to fulfill the social function in their
Yeah.
lives. I think it's probably generationally it's different. Like if you're a young college grad and this is your first job, maybe you are depending
Yeah.
on the office to make those like connections and possibly meet, you know, whoever your special someone's going to be.
Yeah.
But definitely for people who have established families, like I think that the policy around hybrid and flexible work, particularly with families, is so critical for mothers and parents, especially too, because it gives you so much more flexibility to pick up kids from daycare, you know, to not have to like be in an hour long or 45-minute commute when you actually would prefer to spend that time with your family. So it's I think flexibility is key. And I think in recognizing people's different needs at different stages of life, like it's great to offer more social opportunities to connect with your colleagues for those who want it, as you
Yeah.
said, you know, like I don't know that requiring things is ever really the right way to go. Apart from, I do believe in like requiring once or twice a year in-person events, you know,
Yes.
that are funded by the company,
Yeah.
that are designed around like these collaborative kind of ice-breaky type activities, because that those moments I think are so powerful that they can last for months.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing about having annual or
Mhm.
6 monthly get-togethers,
Yeah,
whatever the company can do.
yeah,
And the interesting thing is over 70% of people used to meet their other half at work.
Yeah.
And obviously those statistics are vastly decreasing now for a number of reasons. There's also a fear involved now of
Right.
fraternizing at work because
Right.
of a lot of social movements,
Right.
but also the limiting of in-person gatherings is actually affecting relationship formation.
Right.
And that's something that we don't really want to see as a society. And I think that that's a really sad statistic.
Hmm.
So getting people together and bringing the workplace together for a number of reasons. And we're not saying, we want to match make and that's why to do it, but it's just an interesting statistic
Yeah.
of people used to really meet close relationships, whether that's best friends or close friends or partners at work. So completely getting rid of that in-person interaction isn't the
Hmm.
most effective, I don't think, for
Yeah.
relationship formation and those social bonds that we really need, especially because we spend so much of our time at work.
Yeah.
And if you are someone like me that dedicates a huge amount of time to work, there isn't a lot of time for social gatherings outside of that. So meeting people can be really tough.
Yeah.
And if we look at the statistics too, people are on the increase of how they feel in terms of loneliness and isolation. And if we create times where we can bring everybody together in the workforce, at least we're making some kind of concerted effort
Yeah.
to bring people together and kind of bridge that gap. Although
Right.
it's not going to, change the world and take away loneliness, anything like that, but
Mm.
it's still providing an opportunity for people to have some social connection, which is really key.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's just going to be an ongoing
Yeah.
conversation. Like, I don't think there's ever going to be like a perfect
Yeah.
situation. The model was broken during COVID, and
Yes.
so now, but I just still view it as an opportunity for companies to create really compelling, flexible workplaces and work environments that work
Yeah.
for their employees, and knowing that those can evolve too, right? So,
Yeah, and that's the key point that you made for their employees,
right.
because some people might really like being in the office and say they
Yeah,
want that. What
totally.
COVID
Yeah.
did do is really encourage that what works for us
Yeah.
and what works for you and what's your preference. And I think it really encouraged us asking those questions because we might not have realized how much better we work in one situation because we just weren't used to it.
Right. Yeah.
So it did open the doors for those conversations of what actually suits you better and what will allow you to be happier both inside and outside of work so that you can bring your most productive self to the workplace.
Yeah.
And I think that that is a really big positive, but it is on the company to
Hmm.
find that situation to say, okay, what does work for everyone and where is the balance that we can find?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Great.